Hi, everybody. I am Mark Siebert. I'm president for Reaktor Inc. I can't tell you how excited I am to see this many people in our space. It's been a very long time since we've had a crowd this large here, so thank you all for coming. For those of you who don't know, Reaktor is a global technology consultancy. We specialize in building category-defining products. We're super lucky to be able to work with clients like Paramount, Epic Games, Delta Airlines, Adidas. We really enjoy the work that we get to do with our clients, and likewise, they enjoy the work that they get to do with us because we have some really high-performing teams that get to work autonomously and try things in a way that maybe not every other consultancy gets to do. And I think why we're here tonight is a little bit in that same theme. So trying to understand and talk about artificial intelligence, a topic that's on everybody's mind. How does it affect our jobs? How does it affect the categories and industries that we work in? How does it affect the future? I almost said our future, which sounds super dark, and I mean it sounds super dark, but what does that mean for the future? So really excited to have this panel that's here to talk with us tonight about artificial intelligence. So I am going to turn it over to Tomi, our moderator, and then our panel, Joe, Sin, and Diego. So thank you for coming, enjoy the night, and we'll see you in a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. I try to go there.
You gotta navigate that.
I have to
Oh. Come on,
Poor Sean. Sean has to scoot again.
Well, if you do a pick.
Yeah, just so
Yeah,
everybody knows
Sean,
there
you better
are
pick one of these
four seats
seats.
over
in
here.
the splash zone.
Someone come here to see it.
Is it working?
All right, hi. It's working?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Hey.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Hey, thank you for coming. Nice to see you all here. My name is Tomi Tekkenberg, and I'm a product design director here at Reaktor. I started as a designer more than 20 years ago, and I joined Reaktor about 5 years ago. Tommy, hi, nice to see you. Please sit down, please sit down. I have these notes here.
Oh, we got it. We got a
So-
front row person
There you
with
go.
it.
Cool, yeah. Please,
Oh, we got.
Please. There's one more.
front seat.
Yeah. Let's just make it more weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
seeing empty seats also gives
You
me
get the
phobia. Like nobody
You get
wants
the
to
goodies.
All right, cool. Doing good.
She's like, no.
Yeah. Please, sit down.
Tommy's just like recruiting people for these seats.
I like it.
Yeah.
It's great. I love it. I live.
All right, cool. All right,
Perfect.
we're ready to start.
Yeah.
We have three panelists here. Please introduce yourselves.
Hey everyone, I'm Joe Cahill. I'm the Experience Design Manager at Uncork Digital. We are a platform that services insurance and finance companies. We are a full product shop on top of it, so we do a lot of fun stuff. And I've been doing design for 23 years, which is absolutely terrifying saying it out loud. Graphic design, web design, whatever you want to say, packaging, done it all. And I'm still annoyingly upbeat about it. So if you're new to design, get excited, it's a fun trip ahead.
It's a good trip.
Yeah.
Hi, folks. Nice to meet you. I'm Sin. I am currently a director of user experience. My specific area of expertise is actually in internal tools and data and analytics. So I'm a data nerd. It's cool. Some people think it's less cool. I think it's delightful. Similar to Joe, and we do know each other. So if you realize that we're getting along very well, it's actually because the three of us know each other.
Yeah.
I've actually been designing for about 20 years myself. So the first half of my career was really dedicated to brand marketing, identity, marcom stuff. And then the second half of my career has really been dedicated to digital product. So this is going to be delightful and it will be very fun. And hopefully you guys will also be in design for as long as we have. Feels very weird to say that, but
Yeah.
Even
wishing
longer.
everybody all the best.
Got to watch all the evolutions in one more.
Once you're in for a ride, you're in for life.
All things in the world are designed for what it's worth. And I
true.
think
Oh,
that's
look
why
at
I
that.
do this.
That's very true. So hi everyone, my name is Diego. I am a product designer here at Reaktor. I did product most of my life, my career. I don't have as many experience as these wise people over here. I started in 2011, so 12 years, I guess, right now. But I did product design my whole life, and that's something I'm very passionate about. I actually started working with AI in 2017 on a startup, so I had the chance to be one of those early adopters and learn the intricacies behind it. And happy to share all the knowledge and all the secrets about it. Don't be scared, like she said. It's a good trip, and we're here to help you navigate it.
And so for everybody realize 2017, like that's like forever ago.
It really was not.
So like this is not nothing new. Like it seems like it's new. It's the catchy thing, but
It's not.
some of us
It's
have been
not.
doing
It's
it
not
forever.
new. I think there's a difference between making something more accessible, right, so that it's easier for people to understand and access and work with it, versus something being new.
New.
Yeah.
1950s. That's when the term AI came out, and that's when the first AI was produced.
Yes.
There you go. Sorry, we're jumping right
Sorry.
on moderation.
No problem, no problem.
All the toes. Sorry.
right. Thank you. So let's keep this conversational, and so feel free to jump in through the conversation. And should we start?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's start off with the easiest question. Who's absolutely terrified of AI? Who thinks it's going to take our jobs and it's going to run everything? We got one in the back.
We got one. I feel like he's a plant. Did you plant him?
I think he works
planted
here.
him. He works here. He was like, yeah. I'm going to answer that.
All right, I have a first question here. How AI is affecting design?
So
It's not an easy question.
that's a very easy question. I think it's very funny because again, like with 23 years of doing this job, I've got to see our tools get smarter and get better, right? So again, going back to this AI term was coined in the 1950s. When I started using Illustrator and Photoshop, like it took a big update of like content aware showed up, and then all of a sudden, like my job got 50% faster because I'm like, oh, this is growing, this is getting smarter, and the same thing with AI now, as we have, all the chat stuff and we have image stuff. It's just built to help us kind of grow and be more productive, which I think is awesome.
What I think is like super interesting about this whole concept, right, is every time there is a new iteration of a tool that we've already used for God knows how long, it turns into this weird panic when in reality, a lot of the technological developments are literally here to make the very painstaking thing less painstaking. Have any of you guys ever had to do any photo retouching?
Ooh, we got a lot of
All right,
retouches
so
in the
do
mix.
we all understand how unpleasant it was to cut out hair?
Yeah.
Yes, so we are all very grateful to not have to cut out hair
Yep.
as extensively. Are we saying that it's going to be 100% accurate all the time? No, right? But does it get you 80% of the way there exponentially faster? 100%.
Yeah.
So I think, at least from my perspective, the way I look at this very often is there's two schools of thought, right? There is, hey, AI is technology, has been developed, made more accessible, great. Let's find a use case. Let's find a problem to solve, right? That's one school of thought. And then the other school of thought is when they have found an actual problem to solve, oh my God, does it make my life so much easier? I don't want to cut out hair. It takes so long. Now, instead of it taking 6 hours, it just takes 20 minutes. Life is great. This is great.
And you get more time to be creative with photo.
Yes.
Adding to that, I think, like we said, AI has been a thing for a while. We were trying to create at least human intelligence level on computers. And when, I'm going to go very way back, when the first press came out, when they printed the Bible by Gutenberg,
Oh, that's way
people
back,
were
dude.
like,
That's way back.
people were
It's real
like,
back.
wow, we can actually stop writing by hand each page and print it like massively, and then it got distributed. What I feel like this is going to do is give us more time to spread our creativity across the world. Actually be creative persons and not be just tools of like manipulating a photo and then wasting our like 90% of our day just moving tools and then 10% being creative, which stresses us out. I think as designers, our responsibility though is to find the problem that we want to solve with it instead of just being the new thing that we need to catch on.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, it's our jobs, right? Like everyone here, if you're in product, if you're in design, our job is to make things easier, solve problems. You know, if we can add something to a tool to make things easier. You know, we're luckily planned this perfectly well. Config started today.
Hey.
Figma launched a bunch of new features. Some of them are more design-based, some of them are engineering-based, but they're all around solving problems and using whatever, AI or any type of algorithm behind it, just to kind of, yeah.
I think it's also a matter of when you think about what AI tools are doing, right? Like another way to think about another frame is what you're essentially doing is you're getting to a place where you're starting to dissolve these hard lines and these hard limits, right? So there are folks in here that I have worked with before, and for a lot of those folks, I was their design partner. So it would always be like, what's a problem that we have to solve? What is the data that's available? How it can be cut, right? Like all these weird nuances. And then it's like, all right, we now have to find a front end team to do these things. And all of that is fine, because I fully believe that people should be allowed to do the things that they're really passionate about, that they absolutely love. But what I don't believe in is that folks that are curious, that want to be able to create, why should we be relegated to, the equivalent of what I would say is, trying to rub two wet sticks together in a monsoon trying to make fire, right? Like, why would we do that?
To cut hair for like 3 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think there's just something really beautiful about dissolving some of those barriers and having meaningful conversation, right? Being able to design things in a way, right, that they can be developed without a heavy amount of manipulation. And inadvertently, right, that would also speed up so much of that actual process and that product flow that scares so many people, right? So for me, it's just a lot of how I think about that sort of thing and how I look at the evolution of tools.
Yep.
Because in my mind, AI is just AI in air quotes, right? It's a layering on top of tools that we've had, that we've used forever. It's just a slightly different frame.
Yeah, Adobe Sensei has been around forever. It's been fueling Photoshop and Illustrator for quite a while, and people tend to forget that it's there because it's not labeled AI. It's got a name. It's got a fun, cute name.
It's branded.
It's branded.
Yeah.
Branding works for everything.
True.
Okay, what do you think about this? Does it make any sense? Any
Looking at us
questions?
like we're crazy. They're looking
There's
at us
not a
like we're
lot of
crazy.
blank stares. I think we're doing okay.
Okay, cool. Should we continue? Cool. Another question. How worried should we be that AI will replace our jobs?
Oh,
On
God.
that one. Rock, paper, scissors.
Rock, paper, scissors? Are we rock, paper,
Yeah.
scissors? All right, neither one of you are participating. This is not fun. For
Okay,
me.
so it's not going to take our jobs, right? No matter what happens, a human element still needs to exist. Everybody's kind of all up on ChatGPT and all this stuff on writing content, but there's not. It's a tool to help us build a starting point. It's not the final. We have people who write content that understand nuance and understand people and understand what the direction is and the tone and all that stuff. That's, at this point, I'll say, AI can't replicate that. The same way as I've seen tools that lay out a website. Great, but there's no user research in it. Like, what is this for? There's still so much of what we do. There's so much of what we bring to the table that AI will never be able to replace. I think also for people who work in agencies, there's the meme that popped up that an AI will never understand client requirements because they're never clear. And I think that's great because that shows that what AI can do, it has limits. Like what we have to do and what we have to contribute to this is so much more important.
And let's play on the limited. Let's say it doesn't have any limits. It doesn't have a unique point of view. And I think all of us here, we all see the world differently, and we have something to add on to our design. Ways of working, just like as simple as that. I'm pretty sure if we all give the same prompt, we're going to give different things. AI is going to try to be as accurate as possible. We're going to try to be as unique as we can. And if something will happen, is it will make us push harder to be more creative. I think we're seeing this use of AI, which people are just saying, oh, I can generate designs in 5 seconds. I can do illustrations in 5 seconds. It's like, yeah, but that's not the point. You can do anything you want in 5 seconds. Is it going to be good? Is it going to be different from the rest? No, it's going to be one more from the bucket. If I take the time to polish my craft and really understand the user needs and really understand where we're going, that's what's going to be the standpoint. And we're going to be able to sell our experience as something that is valuable and not just something extra that comes with our title.
If I'm hearing both of you correctly, it sounds like what we're really talking about is human connection, right? Because at the end of the day, that's as much as designers, we want to believe like we solve problems, but the first step to that is always understanding that there is a human element to this, and there is a very big difference between the things that you said and the things that you meant, right? And I feel like as designers, so much of our work that nobody ever sees is trying to understand what is the gap between what you said and what you meant. What is the problem that is worth solving for, and what is the problem that you say that you have, right? Because we're not saying that you don't have practical, low-hanging fruit, things that we can actually solve for. But there's almost always something that is exponentially deeper and more difficult to solve for. And that's the stuff that's actually worth doing. But interestingly, I would say more than 3/4 of the challenges that you'll experience in your career as a designer, not because a problem is really that hard to solve for. It is literally closing the gap between what somebody said and what they meant and what is worth solving for. And to Diego's point, it's like, sure, you can make 100 illustrations. You can solve 100 problems. But the real question becomes, is this the problem that's worth solving? Is there actual value? Can we generate value in that? And I think that's just kind of at a place where, will technology eventually catch up? Maybe, hopefully, I don't know, right? But in the space that we are in right now, I'm not really that wildly concerned, because guess what? 3/4 of my job right now involves people. Like you guys, us, right? Like it's literally just people.
We're communicators in a way. It doesn't matter what we're communicating, it's the way that we do it and our experience, how we learn to do that.
Yes.
That's our career, and we're going to keep improving on that. Every day I learn something new that I apply to my job. Yeah. And AI can do that for sure, but it can do it my way, no.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
And
Thank
also
you.
with UX research, like that's a whole other avenue. Like, yeah, we could probably get an AI to write prompts, right? Write our questions. But it takes us to sit there and listen to what they're saying and follow their crazy ass down a rabbit hole that might lead to like really great insights. They'll just generate their questions, and if they answer the question, they answer the question. This is where, I'm not that I'm ever afraid of my job, because you know what, I love this, and it shows through. Like, and AI will never be as excited as we are about doing this stuff, but it's that human element that we have to always focus on. Like we're trying to figure out these problems, right?
I 100%. I think when you said the excitement part, that's the biggest human factor we have as designers. We chose this in a way. It doesn't matter if we do it for the money, if we do it for like the passion of design, but we chose it, and we have a responsibility as designers to really, really push the envelope of what design is. It's very fresh. It's a career that it hasn't been defined for a while. It's just very recently defined as a college career, and I think, to the excitement part, a computer will never feel that kind of emotion, at least in the next couple hundred years yet. We're not yet that advanced. And if it does, I'm happy to embrace that. But we should use it for our excitement. We should be like, some people were seeing the experience in the front. I was just seeing the faces of like playing things. And I think that's never going to be taken away from us. And it's never going to take away our job if we do a good job there. I know I was being redundant, but
yeah. But I think it's also for us. Sorry, Tommy. I'm
Sorry,
sorry, Tommy. Yeah, sorry. We're just going to keep going. I think it's also like you're saying. Like there's a sell that comes to it too. For anybody who's worked with clients, we're the part that has to sell it to the client. We have to work with our stakeholders and sell them on, hey, this is a good move. Like we should try this. Should be our priority. This is what the users need. Like if they just have facts that without any type of push behind it, like what are we going to do? We're just going to have roadmaps filled with menial tasks of let's just update buttons today because that's what the AI said. It's for us to always look bigger, and I think that's where it's our sell, it's our amped up part of it that just is great.
I think there's like a wild difference though when, sorry, Tommy.
This is the last one.
I'm sorry, I'm done.
Then we continue.
But But I think that there's just such a wild difference between data informed and data driven, right? Like, to be a nerd. There's a huge difference because I feel like oftentimes it's so hard to skate that line because folks are just like, this is what the data is telling us what to do. And I'm like, bro, that's not how that works, right? Like, that is one part of a much more complicated ecosystem that involves context. And so for me, I think the reason why I'm slightly less terrified of AI taking over my job is like, is it at a point where you can fully understand human context? I don't really think so, right? Like you're listening to the three nerds here, yammering on about AI with this level of excitement, and it's like, let me know when you find a computer that is half as excited and half as in love with what we do.
By the way,
I'm
I
here for
already
it.
forgot what the question was that he asked.
He was asking if we were afraid that AI was going to take our jobs.
Yeah. So thank you. I'm not worried anymore. Is someone
He's
else
worried
worried?
about stuff.
Sorry, Tommy. Sorry.
Yeah, cool. Another question related to this one. So you can still talk about AI. So don't worry.
Joe's like, I'm here for him.
I'm trying to peek the question.
Yeah. As a designers, how can we harness AI to improve the user experience?
Ooh. Well, you're the one who's working in it, so
Yeah,
you
you
can start
start
that
first.
one off.
First of all, understand it. Know how it works. Try to understand how it works as simple as you can. Ask your developers who's working on it. Look for any possible explanation of how the technology works, because that's going to give you the tools to design for it. And then the second part of it is, I work on a startup that was using AI for everything. So basically, I sit down with their developer, like their CTO is like, okay, I have a full week. Sit down with me every single day. He gave me a crash course. It was the most awful thing I've ever heard in my life because I came out like almost crying of like, I don't want to hear all this anymore. But then something happened that I was like, oh, this is actually being used the wrong way. How can we change that? It gave me the full understanding of not a user, but something else. And improving the user experience is understanding who you're targeting to and what's the goal of it. And we were missing the goal of the AI. It was just an AI. And then it became so much more. It was actually focused for email. So it wasn't great. I just want to point that out. But
At least you didn't say instant messenger.
no, it wasn't instant. But actually, once I understood how it was working, I was like, okay, now I can design for also improving how it registers the data and improving the user experience from also giving better data from the AI to the user. So it's kind of like a ping pong. And that's the biggest tip. And the second tip is just don't be afraid of learning about those tools, because there are so many different ones. We all talk about ChatGPT, but that's just like the tip of the iceberg. There are tools that are great for summarizing. I just found about this, I've been using it. Research papers that are like thick as this, and you don't want to read the whole thing. Summarizing a research paper is the best thing that can happen to me. Because if I want to read it, I'll read it. But it's just a waste of time. I don't want to go through that. So that's a great way to use it for user research too.
I think for me, what's been really fascinating, what's been really eye-opening is similar to you. I work with some of the brightest data scientists ever. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, hi, I'm a designer. No idea what's going on. But they're more than happy to explain the inner workings of it, right? Like, how was it trained? What does that data set look like, right? Like, what were the inputs that informed the outputs? I think for me, being able to draw that line and that connection, albeit I probably don't have as much depth as you do, gives me a point of view, right? And once you understand, and again, going back to our jobs as designers and probably as human beings, broadly speaking, is to understand stuff. And once you kind of understand how that technology loosely works, you can start to think about what are the use cases and the applications of it. You group those use cases into different scenarios, and surprise, you'll probably find something that is worth solving for. So from my perspective, one of the most useful ways that I really worked with AI was more specifically through generative research, because people will just say stuff, like lots of stuff, and you're like, dude, it doesn't matter how fast you can type. It really doesn't matter. There's going to be that misinterpretation between what somebody said and, again, what they meant, right? So I think what's been really fascinating for me is being able to use this next generation of tools to not just capture transcripts to a factor of the fact that it's probably 80% correct, 100% not so much, but gets you most of the way there. The summary piece of being able to look at a conversation and be like, cool, these are the things that we talked about, right? And then being able to say, and then being able to basically take every single one of those sentences, break it down, surgically pull it apart, and find actual requirements, find actual problems to solve for. That used to take me hundreds of hours. It's so nice that it doesn't do that anymore. I don't know about you. Do you remember when you used to have to like manually transcribe every single conversation and then pull things apart?
Yeah. Yes. I still do it.
It wasn't hundreds of hours. It was literally like months of research that has now.
Not enough coffee.
There's
or wine
not enough wine.
to go through all the conversation.
Nah, man. At that point, you just don't even bother with wine. It's just straight tequila.
It's true.
But at a certain, but like it's crazy, right? When you think about these were tools that existed, right? The concept of capturing what somebody is saying, the concept of, all right, cool, let's take the time to understand it, let's reinterpret it, let's reframe it into problem spaces or themes, what we commonly, very fondly called affinity mapping now, right? There are literally technologies that can generate thematic approaches, right? Does it mean that you don't have to sit down and still listen to it? No. Does it mean that the themes are 100% all the time? No. There's still a level of human connection and still a level of proofreading, I would say, that you still have to do to make sure that all of these things make sense. But does it speed up the work exponentially from 6 months to 6 weeks? 100%.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's also much to like Diego was saying, it's like tools, right? For people who have been designing for as long as some of us are, you remember when websites were done in frames and it was just one image sliced up. It was a horrible, horrible time for all of us. Then there was Flash. And then there was,
Which is also bad.
which, yeah, then the iPhone came out and people were just like, oh, is there a way to load websites on it faster? And then we had HTML5 and CSS and all this stuff. And it's the same thing as technology progresses, it's up to us to constantly push ourselves to be creative, right? Like we now have a space that we can maybe start creating more contoured information for people and understand who they are from like some of their prompts. Like anybody who's done like an onboarding experience or does online shopping, like how, I don't know why all of a sudden Amazon is showing me like clogs. I don't wear clogs. I wear Air Force Ones and shell tops. Like that's all I wear. Like I'm from New York. That's how it works.
Your wife, she's stealing your Amazon account.
But that's the thing, right? Like why is the algorithm teeing these things up for me? So it's like, how can we use it, right? We have to constantly think about how we can use these tools. If you're working for a company that's building like a recipe website, like why don't you start figuring out ways to go by what they're put a recipe.
Tell a story, make it interesting. I feel like the one thing that I would say is, yes, in a minute, but one of the things that I would definitely say is that like, when was the last time that you pushed yourself to use a tool and been like, this was completely, one, a waste of my time, and two, I learned nothing out of this?
Adobe XD.
Aside from that, oh wait, no, but you know what? Their prototyping capabilities were pretty dope.
Yeah, but they just canceled it, so it's a waste of time.
Yeah, well, you still learned how to
but you
prototype
cannot use it anymore.
Diego, what are you doing, man? Why are you ruining my story? Anyways,
No. She has a good point.
But
I
my
have an
point is
interesting
that, like,
question
if you're-
here. Do you want to hear it?
My
You have
point
to
is like
move
if
on?
you're trying to learn something, right? Like, just learn it. There's literally nothing that stops you from doing that. All right.
All right.
Tommy, I'm done.
Tommy,
Cool.
what you got?
Thank you. How can we encourage employees to use AI for productivity purposes and not simply to take shortcuts?
Using AI. So this is a weird question. So
Is it?
yeah, because not using AI for a shortcut.
It's weird adjacent.
Yeah, it's like the term shortcut seems like it's bad, but also if it can help you get your job done a little more efficiently, then it's good. Outside of like for a lot of younger designers that might be looking for a job, using AI to look at your resume. For instance, my resume was written in 4 different tenses. Some of them were my past tense, some of them were the present, and some were in third person. I don't know what happened, but I ran it through an AI generator to I said the prompt was like fix all the tenses, and it gave me like an update. And that, for me, that was like, easier because writing is not my strong suit. As you all could tell, I'm super eloquent, but it's it's using it to find a way to get things done. And I think for all of us, if it's, and we were talking about this before, like how do we use this technology right? It's using it for us. One of the big things for designers, which a lot of us don't have to do if you're working in an enterprise and you're using Jira, they want us to story point stuff. For a lot of designers, we don't know how to story point things. That's an engineer thing. So it's giving us, using AI to kind of understand the type of work we do, the type of designer they are, how long they take to work. It might be able to help us get faster, and understand our workload and understand how we can get better at it. So as a shortcut, I'm all for it. Hell, use it as much as you want, but as long as it's using it in a way that it's effective, and I think that's what we've kind of been talking about consistently is using AI for the good.
The good.
The good.
I think necessarily it's not about saying shortcut is a negative thing, but I feel more like skipping learning steps.
Yes.
And I think what you just said.
That's a trap, man. That's such a trap to say that it's about skipping the learning piece, right? The reason it's a trap is because people learn in different ways. So to specifically say somebody skipped this step of learning, the way that I learn is literally by, hey, this thing looks pretty cool. Let me reverse engineer it and then figure out how I can put it back together. Does that mean that 9 out of 10 times I miss a lot of the basics and I have to go back to it at a later date? 100%, if I feel so compelled to go back into it, right? But is reverse engineering really shortcutting something? I don't really buy that, dude. I just don't,
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of how people learn. Are there foundational things that folks should understand if you're working with a software development team? Yes. Right?
Like you said with the data too, it's there is a human thing that you cannot skip, and this is the same. You have to, in a way, to use AI wisely and to really leverage the power, you at least have to understand the basics. If I'm going to do an AI generated portrait and I don't know anything about photography,
oh yes.
will it work? No. I think it wouldn't.
It would.
Give me-
Wouldn't
It
work
would
the
look
way
awful.
you want it.
For
Yeah.
a mom or for something casually, but if you show it to a photographer, it will say this is awful, because there are certain rules for a portrait that you need to.
That I understand. I think that I wouldn't call them rules, but I would call them golden truths, right? If you are in a specific domain, it is kind of your job to understand the domain, right? For example, I will never be a professional roller skater. Why? Because I'm very clumsy. And 2, I have very poor spatial awareness. But because I know these things about myself, I would not just be you know what? Let's just throw down with Joe in a roller rink. I'm not doing that.
Hold on. Is that you insinuating that I'm a good roller skater?
I feel like you would knock me.
I
would
do. I
knock
have
me
roller
out.
plates
You
at
would
home,
knock
just
me
for the
out.
record. Yeah.
But I think that for what it's worth, yes, I agree with you to the extent of knowing your domain, which I think is also attributed to read the room, figure out what room you're in,
Yep.
right? And it's not a matter of feeling insecure or any derivative of that. No one's expecting anybody to be an expert on all things of all things. But if you're having a targeted conversation, dang man, try to figure out what exactly you're going to be talking about. And what some of the foundations are, and there's nothing wrong with understanding that and asking those questions. But do I think that AI is really in a space right now where it's going to understand all those domains? Not so much, unless you can explicitly state that. So one of the
Brings in prompts.
one of the fascinating conversations that the 3 of us had a couple of nights ago was, it's so fascinating how if the ability to write a great prompt is in some ways somewhat rooted in understanding how development and coding works, because you're essentially telling technology to do a thing. So the level of specificity has to be there. And if you understand that, then the anatomy of prompt is actually not as complicated as a lot of folks say, because they'll be oh, I put in this prompt, it gave me a thing that was not the thing that I wanted, and I'm great. There's still a gap between what you meant and what you said. So if you get to a place where you can more explicitly state the things that you meant, your odds are exponentially better.
So now, sorry, Tommy.
Sorry, Tommy.
So this brings up
Tommy's
a really
gonna
good,
hate you.
a really
It's
good
like-
question of, and I know it's not one of our questions,
Sorry,
but
Tommy.
one of our questions around, do we even know how to use AI?
Probably not. Most likely not.
That goes back to what I said.
Yeah.
Try to.
Yeah.
Try to.
You know, like going back to this idea of if you want to achieve a goal, you ask the right questions to get the right answer, right? I've seen so many of these wonderful Instagram posts of people using generative AI when the beta came out in Photoshop, and it was them changing out backgrounds and doing all very, very basic stuff. And everybody was just like, ooh, look at that. It changed it to
So
a
fancy.
beach. It changed the light source. It changed, but how much more detailed can we get, and how better can we use this tool if we're asking very specific questions? People are using it very broadly right now, and I think this is also, again, our naivete of something that's coming into our world. You know, as all of us have been designers, every time there's an update to a software, every time there's something new that comes into our purview, we're all kind of like, so what do we do with this? You know, when Figma brought out variants into its software, I was just like, oh, so I'm going to make all of these buttons, and it's going to be super easy to swap them out. And then they were like, oh, we're making variants easier. And I'm like, oh, so I have these 35 components that I can knock down to 5. Great, you know, but it is great because it cuts out the work for the next time I have to do it. So I think it's always rolling with our evolution in some way and learning. That's what we got to do.
There's like a really big difference though, right? Like whenever they're rolling out new features and it's like super delightful, because who would not want a simpler way of doing something, right?
Yeah.
Like we all want that. I think what's been super fascinating is thinking about the backwards compatibility of things, because you're like, oh yes, let us update this, and then you're like, oh wait, now I have to update all 55 instances of something that has existed forever.
Yeah, it's definitely rough, but I think this is where, like, as we see these tools popping up, like just get into it, see what you could do, like see how it'll just benefit you, because you never know where it's going to benefit you. I think that's the beauty of it.
And I also think that a lot of this right now is a part of a grander experiment, right? Like, if there's more designers working in these tool sets, there's ostensibly more data for it to be trained on, right? Like fundamentally at the end of the day. And so am I at all surprised that the thing that I wanted it to do is not what's currently happening? No, not surprised about that at all. Why? Because, well, can we think about how many data sets this thing was probably trained on when it came to designer stuff?
I'll let Tommy go, but I want to say something like about that.
Keep it short. Keep it short.
I'll take my word for it.
Cool.
How many of you know, like, pay attention to the CAPTCHAs when you're selecting images?
CAPTCHAs are amazing. I love CAPTCHAs.
So when training AI, since the first CAPTCHA came out, we've been doing free work for these companies to get data sets on what an image has. And so, pointing that out, this has been part of like a big conglomeration of different models that came out to where we are right now. So again, to get the fear out, this has been happening for like 20 years, and it's something that it will get better, but it will take time. You can go now.
All right. Thank you. I have a couple of questions now. So first one, how can we apply AI to our workflows? You kind of already answered, but do you want to continue, or should we skip this?
Yeah. Anybody else have any ideas on workflows?
I always have things on workflows.
I know you always have
I just feel
things
like
on
this
things.
is probably not a good idea. Do we want to get into that rabbit hole?
What do we got next?
Yeah, what
Next
do we got
one,
next?
no.
What do we got next?
How can we ensure that the dataset we use to train AI models is representative and doesn't include harmful bias?
Ooh, that's such a loaded question.
Yeah, it is.
That's so loaded. You ask somebody what harmful and bias means, it's going to mean something exponentially different to somebody else.
Yeah. So I think this is where we all know the internet is a fun place, for lack of a better term.
Fun as in haha, or fun as in we?
It doesn't take the evils of the world in consideration at all. It's just a happy, neutral space where everybody can say what they want. But I think that's the thing. Like, as AI grows, and we saw it. What was it? Who released some kind of AI personality onto Twitter and then immediately became evil and racist? Like,
So many of those.
Yeah,
dude.
like that's the thing that happens is that.
I mean, I feel like that happens every day.
that happens
we-
on a fairly regular basis at this point.
But it's up to us to put in the data that is the most helpful to what we need to do. Let's say all of us want to use it for UX research, or we all want to use it for product design, right? If it's not filled with good information that makes sense, it's not going to be useful to us. You know, it's like filling a backpack with rocks and being like, you know what, this is going to be super easy to carry. We have to make sure that we're at least giving it space to carry it in sections.
I would abstract that even further out, right? Like one of the things that you fundamentally understand about data analysis is garbage in, garbage out, right? Like you might do the best analysis in the world against a garbage data set. Your resulting study is going to be garbage, right? Like that's there's just a point of understanding that the inputs that you feed are going to impact the outputs, all of which is fine. But it begs a deeper question. I feel like this question begs a deeper question around like, you know, like, are we now like morality governance, right? Like, is the question around how do we eliminate harmful things? Or are we now having a debate about what morality means, right? I don't feel like I'm in a position where I can debate what morality is. Like, are there things that I vehemently find distasteful and horrible? 100%. But if we're looking at this from a pure data perspective, one of the more interesting approaches might be considering what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And then training it against actual data sets, right, that help to resolve that issue. So.
And adding just to that, I think we're all human beings, so we have a morality like compass, right? It's not about that. It's more about like being neutral about the information and try to understand when it's going biased towards the wrong way. Mm-hmm. When you put a photo and you ask, give me a photo of like diversity, and it just gives you all white people. Like, I'm so sorry, but like you don't want to do that. You just want to make sure that you're having, like, as designers, we try to do. We try to be diverse and we try to embrace every culture. And AI has been trained with models that may be too narrow, and it's our, like I said, understanding how it works to understand how we can break the rules or bend them. And expand that.
Expand.
Change, yeah. We are designers, we're changing the rules all the time. Why we cannot change the rules of how AI is biased? We can actually make that change.
I think honestly, by virtue of the fact that the three of us are sitting here, that's been a pretty interesting social experiment of bending rules.
That's true.
Like,
We're normal though.
yeah, but I'm saying that if you ask my parents what they thought I should be doing for a living,
Oh yeah.
Oh, but that's how
This was
That's
not
a
it.
whole-
This is not
that's-
it.
We need like a different bar in front of us for that one.
Yeah, we can talk about that in another.
But I think there's something really interesting to the point of, almost done. But I think what's interesting to this point is this conversation around intention. Yes. Right? Like intention, inclusion. What do we mean when we say inclusion? It's so simple to use the word and say the word. It's so much harder to actually implement it. And when you spend the time to actually do that, that's when fruitful outputs of various technologies, not just AI related, but various technologies become prevalent and interesting and meaningful. It's not just a conversation about usefulness. It's a conversation about what is meaningful. And I think that is really what I hope we're kind of taking away from this
Oh, you
conversation.
can all take it home too.
Yeah.
I think that's more important.
What else you got, Tommy?
I'm out of questions. So
You're out of questions.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
no,
Does
that's
anyone
really
have a
good
question?
So we have like about 10 minutes. Anyone? I saw a hand right.
She had a question too.
That was a question too. You claim it first, so you can go take it.
I'm gonna come there with the mic. So
Wait, here, over here, Tommy. First.
Sorry, we're like
You're
definitely
getting
putting you
a
on
mic.
the
Yeah, let's
spot.
just move it back.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, I was curious about this concept of like wanting to understand the technology more. And I kind of wanted to see if you could expand a little bit on like what are the metrics or the things that you all have used to kind of sense that your understanding is like starting to like crystallize, or you're actually starting to like apply AI in a way that you're getting like the kind of results that you expected. Because like when you're learning how to develop like, I don't know, like a website, you feel like you can actually, you're like the things that you're like learning are actually being applied, and the things that you were able to build are becoming more interesting and expressive. So what is that like for AI? Because I'm just curious how you
I
know
just
that
said
you've
bending
understood
the
enough.
rules right now, and I said I think
Yeah.
that's the point. Is when you're comfortable enough to go beyond what the tool gives you and just do more than is expected. An example of that is just using Midjourney. I was just telling someone, I use it as a resource to generate just like color maps for my photos or for like presentations. I don't use it for generating an image. I just get like weird prompts and I get color palettes out of it because I understand how to get the results that I want. So you have to understand the basics. It's like what I was saying before about photography. If I grab a camera, right, professional camera, and I don't understand what focal distance is, I don't understand the different lenses that I can use or the ISO, like, I'm not going to have a lot of like choices to manipulate what I want to get. I will probably go to automatic and just tweak and the photo is going to be okay. But the more I know, the more experimental I can get. And that's at least my measure to identify if the tool is giving me something that I can play around with in my normal workflow.
I think for me, a lot of the thinking is twofold, right? So we're gonna park experience aside for a second, because I'll be very honest with you, where a fair amount of the decisions that I make about whether or not an output was useful to me is based off of pure instinct of, this just looks all kinds of wrong. We're not gonna trust that. But if you're not at a place where you've been doing this far too long, the other way to think about it is competitively, right? What are the top competitors doing right now today? Did you do that level of analysis? Did you understand and identify, for example, like from a copy perspective, what are the themes that are covered? What is the basic structure of that story? How does that break apart? Does this thing that came out of this piece of technology match even remotely to that structure? Because if it doesn't, probably a good time to do a little more digging, do a little more diving, reprompt it, rewrite it. We're just not at a place, in my opinion, where all of the technology, all of the output that's gonna come from these things are gonna give you what you want the first time. We're just not there. And so, unfortunately for folks that are in this interesting space right now where all of this technology is developing, in a weird way, you almost have to learn double the amount of skills, because you have to understand what the anticipated outputs might be based off of competitive market research, based off of competitive analysis, understanding, and then layering it with what actually came out, and was that right? Because if it wasn't, you would know relatively quickly. So, not to be weird or creepy, but just to say, like, look, AI will get you 80 to 90% of the way there. Is it going to get you 100% over the threshold? No. Why? Because our jobs literally involve people, and people are kind of unpredictable, right? So for that last mile analysis and that last mile thinking, you can ask either of these two dudes next to me. We can definitely tell you that that last 10% of the work takes up 90% of your time.
Yeah.
So that's the way that I would explain for you to think about it, is like, look at what you're getting and take a critical lens to it, right? Develop your critical thinking skills. Not saying that, you know, whatever. No, but like, develop your critical thinking skills, right? And then be able to pull apart the things that you're getting and understand the value of what you're getting and whether or not it is valuable to you and your clients and your business.
So for me, it actually touches on something you said earlier. I'm a designer by trade, right? Like, I've done some engineering here and there, and it's been fun, but I'm not an expert. I find a good partner to work with, a good engineer to work with that is, just so you guys know, like, engineers are just as amped up about this technology as we are. They're dying to use it in some way, shape, or form. And if you come to them with an idea, there's that level of complexity and severity of like, hey, can this be done in a way that'll be effective? Can it be done in a way that will like fit the budget and all these things? So it's like, we have to make sure that we have somebody that's great to work with that'll push us as much as we'll push them. Throughout the years, I've tortured engineers on ideas and being like, let's do this. And they're like, no. It's going to take too much time. That's not going to be, you know, we don't have that many story points. The budget's going to get busted. And I'm just like, but like, it's really cool. And they're just like, no. But that's the thing, is that I've had other instances where I've been like, yo, I would love to do this. And they're just like, yes. I have not been able to do that yet. I would love to do that. So it's like pushing, use your team. I think it's also a big thing that we haven't even talked about yet, is how the team dynamic comes into it amongst everybody. Because I'm sure, again, like there's product people out there that are dying to build some kind of AI tool, and there's a company that is like, how can we use the buzzwords? Like there's probably VP somewhere at some finance company. It's like, we need to use AI, and then have no idea what that means, right?
Feels great,
like,
man. Feels great.
And
Have
it's
another question?
yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah,
We're gonna get to
we have
Kate.
an
Don't
option.
worry,
Sorry,
I'm not
we're
gonna
almost
forget
done.
about Kate. But I think that's the thing, right? Like it's for us to always like be great at it, and like we don't have to be great at it from like an actual technical level.
Okay, I'm used to Joe never stopping. I was wondering if each of you could speak to a specific instance in your work that you've used AI and the specific tool you've used to do it.
For me, a lot of what we do is we do a lot of internal tools, dashboard work. Never get any information to make the designs like look real. So I've been using like Fig GPT to kind of just put in information, because for a lot of design, as we all know, and this goes back to the beginning of time, when you don't have the correct information in there, it could break a design when somebody comes in and they're like, oh, what do you mean there's a text limit? So I think, especially for industries that I have no idea about, I don't know about insurance and like government work, that's not my thing. So being able to like quickly generate some information just to kind of set them on a journey of saying like, oh, yeah, this is kind of right, but we do things a little differently. And I'm like, no problem. One of the biggest things, for everybody who knows lorem ipsum, it's kind of a thing of the past now, because now I can generate names of people and titles and all the things that come with it that make a product feel kind of like together, and it helps clients just understand that like, oh, okay, so if I want to put as much information in a data table, it's going to look absolutely horrible. So that's how I've been using it right now. I'd love to use more of it, but we're kind of more of an internal tool thing right now.
I think what's like kind of funny about that is like, wait till lorem ipsum makes a comeback. It will always make a comeback. I'm just saying.
I mean,
Everything that is retro always makes a comeback.
To be fair, it was from the press idea. They were
Yes.
using lorem ipsum for that.
Oh
So
my gosh, Mr. Genius over here. Sorry. Kidding.
sorry, it's just getting engraved in college.
I like
No,
the
I
fact
like
that
it.
it's old school. This is how.
It came
Again,
back.
going
I actually am in
going
love with
back to
it.
how technology has changed. Like, I don't think there's any person that was in a printing press that thinks that we would have computers in our hand, right? Like,
True.
This dude might have.
and I think this is where a lot of
I mean,
us
holy
keep going with our technology, and we keep growing with it.
I think what's been really fascinating about like AI in general, right, is once you understand the technology, being able to take a step back from it. So one of the folks that I'd worked with in the past, one of the things that we actually looked at was their very insane amount of imagery. We're not going to call it a digital asset management tool. Not going to call it that. But there was a client that had a ton of imagery. And so what was pretty interesting is, as designers, I don't know if you guys have this problem, but you kind of collect a lot of stuff over time. Backgrounds, textures,
150,000 fonts.
150,000 fonts, lots of different stock photos. Like, it's just bad. So one of the interesting things that I had partnered with one of my friends on was basically being able to create a tool that can read the asset that you had, right? And being able to categorically organize it. Why? Because it is wildly overwhelming to have 50 gigs, if not more, assets sitting around that you are now too overwhelmed to organize, but they still need to be organized and cataloged somehow. So for me, what's been really fascinating was actually watching that whole process of how does this thing understand how to read an asset, right? And then that learning process of understanding, oh, hey, this Illustrator brush literally needs to be able to be read somehow. How is that going to work? So for me, it was like a really interesting crash course in understanding how to develop tools that are not just specific to an organization that I work on, but tools that have a direct impact on my ability to execute my job on a regular basis. That was super, super fascinating. Just the basic understanding of, hey, in order for this thing to be able to understand what it's looking at, it literally needs to be able to see it.
Well,
in a
that's what
way.
AI does. It
Yeah.
basically, right now we're at the point where it's just basics, and I will close with this, where it's just like trying to learn how a kid learns. Reading one thing, there's an AI for reading, there's an AI for writing, there's an AI for seeing images. And I gotta say, since I worked with AI before, I learned how those things work and how it interprets the data models and data sets. And so in my day-to-day, I want to say, and I'll wrap with this, because I know we're on time.
Somebody's giving you a look, he's giving you a look. There's
I think I use it for that. I use it for like, help me read when I don't have the time. Summarize this for me. Help me understand what I wrote. Is it clear for someone else? Does it make sense? Because sometimes I doubt myself when I'm writing an email. And so in my day-to-day, I cannot tell you how many tools I use because right now I lost track. But it doesn't. I think my top 3, I forgot the name, but I'll promise I'll give it to you, is for research papers, the one I mentioned. It's like Research GPT or something. They all have GPT in the name. I always use Midjourney all the time. I've been using the Photoshop beta to like help me do tools. And then I use ChatGPT to help me with like, I'm bilingual, so I translate a lot. And so I help like not get lost in language. And I use the translator of ChatGPT, typos or things that are misspelled, or help me write because I trained ChatGPT to write like me in a way, so it knows my favorite words.
That's actually a really interesting use case too. For anybody who's ever worked on a product that needs multiple language support.
Oh my gosh.
You know, one of the biggest things that as we're designing, 90% of the time we're designing in English, right? Like that's what one of the core languages that a lot of us use and most of the clients use. And if it has to be translated into French Canadian, it's not just French, it's French Canadian. You know, it's a different type of tense and terminology of how they use things. So using that to kind of get a gist for a client of being like, listen, so I know you want this hero space to have this many words in it, but once it's translated into French Canadian, this is what it's going to look like. It breaks the 4 lines and makes the entire thing like 150,000 pixels. Like we can't do that. So it's keeping people in check. And I think that's a great use case that I want to start using it for because I think it's
tips. I can tell
yeah,
you
I
how.
think it's good. This is how we use it, right? We use it to solve our problems ahead of time so they don't become problems later.
I think from an inspiration standpoint, there's
Oh, yeah.
so much to be said of that. Does cross ethic lines, so please don't just be randomly ripping off things that you generate through AI art. However, I think through your lens of creating interesting color palettes or through being able to think about what are concepts that you would do for a photo shoot, for a product photo shoot, is super fascinating.
There's like a whole spectrum of things that you can play around with.
Yeah, it's from, at least for me, a big part of it was almost always the inspirational bit and being able to sit down and say, what are some of my possibilities that take me outside of the confines of my own thinking, right?
We're going
One
to,
more question.
one more
question.
Keep it short.
Keep it
Unfortunately,
short.
Oh my God.
Haven't you met us?
He's looking at you when he's saying keep it short.
Gentleman
Yeah.
in the corner.
Yeah, it's a either or question, which is great, so keep it short. But my question is basically, we heard a lot about like quality, human love into design, right? We also heard a lot of like how AI can help with that, right? And how we should, use AI to be more efficient. And obviously we know clients, they're always like two big things is saving money and saving time, right? So my question is either or. Would you guys hire a designer or more AI tools?
Oh,
Always
100% a
designers.
designer.
Designer.
Always a designer.
Yeah.
I have the AI tool in my computer right now. What would I hire? What do I want to hire a designer?
Right.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, too, to think about, right? Like, as a professional, if we don't bring in the next generation of designers, this profession will die. Like, that's the reality of the game. Not to sound morose or weird or creepy.
I wish
right?
it was like a thunderclap as
But it
you
doesn't
said
have
that.
anything to do.
But but the point is that, like, yes, AI speeds up productivity for us. The way that we're thinking about it, the way that we utilize the way I think about it and utilize it on a regular basis, it's from a productivity standpoint. However, to me, design is more than what something looks like, and it's more than just how somebody experiences a flow. I don't think about design that way. For me, design is very much tied to how does this function? How does this work, right? And so do I think that the way that I think about using AI today from a productivity standpoint is going to replace the thinking, the passion, the excitement of a human?
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Tommy, would you hire a designer? Would you hire,
Yeah, would you hire a
an
designer,
AI?
Tommy?
Designer.
Perfect, absolutely.
He's not going to hire any of us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy.